London, 1809. The season's most glittering ball blazed with candlelight at Almack's assembly rooms. Silk gowns swirled across polished floors as the cream of society danced, flirted, and schemed beneath crystal chandeliers. In a shadowed corner near the refreshment table, Miss Georgiana Pemberton stood alone. At 32, she had long accepted her place in society's hierarchy, not as a participant but as a chaperone, an ornament, a cautionary tale whispered behind fans. "There's our dear Aunt Georgiana," came a sweet, poisonous voice. "Still haunting the wallflower corner, I see." Georgiana turned to find her nieces, Lydia and Cressida Pemberton, approaching with their usual mixture of false affection and genuine cruelty. Both girls were in their second season, both beautiful in the golden porcelain way society prized, both determined to marry well. "Girls," Georgiana acknowledged with a slight nod. "You look lovely tonight." "Of course we do," Lydia said, smoothing her pale pink gown. "Unlike some people, we actually make an effort, though I suppose at your age effort would be rather pointless." Cressida giggled behind her fan. "Lydia, don't be cruel. Aunt Georgiana does her best. It's not her fault she's plain as pudding and twice as dull." The words stung, though Georgiana had heard worse over the years. She was plain, brown hair without luster, grey eyes without sparkle, a figure that was neither fashionably willowy nor attractively curved. At 17, she'd been overlooked. At 22, pitied. At 32, she was simply invisible, except to her brother's family, who never let her forget her dependents. "I'm quite content," Georgiana replied evenly. "Not everyone needs to be the center of attention." "Content?" Lydia laughed. "Is that what you call it? Poor spinster aunt living on charity with no prospects and no future. How wonderfully content you must be." "At least she's useful for chaperoning," Cressida added. "Though honestly, who needs a chaperone when the chaperone is less appealing than wallpaper? No gentleman would bother looking at you even if we weren't here." Georgiana's hands tightened on her reticule, but she maintained her composure. She'd learned long ago that responding only encouraged their cruelty. Better to endure in silence. "Oh, look," Lydia breathed, her attention suddenly diverted. "The Duke of Ashford has arrived. Finally, someone worth pursuing." Georgiana followed her niece's gaze to the entrance, where a tall, imposing figure stood surveying the assembly. Julian Ashford, 9th Duke of Ashford, was universally acknowledged as the season's greatest prize. 34 years old, devastatingly handsome, wealthy beyond imagination, and still unmarried despite countless attempts to ensnare him. He also had a reputation for being impossibly selective and coldly intelligent. In 7 years since inheriting his title, he'd shown interest in precisely no one. "He's magnificent," Cressida sighed. "I must contrive an introduction." "You?" Lydia scoffed. "Mother promised me first attempt at the Duke. You can have whatever's left after I've captured his attention." As her nieces plotted and preened, Georgiana watched the Duke with detached interest. He moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to adoration. Mothers pushed their daughters forward. Young ladies arranged themselves in his path, yet he acknowledged each attempt with polite coolness and continued forward. His path led directly past Georgiana's corner. She pressed herself back against the wall, making herself as small and invisible as possible. The Duke would pass by without noticing her, as everyone did. She had perfected the art of disappearing. But the Duke didn't pass by. He stopped directly in front of Georgiana, his piercing blue eyes fixing on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Pemberton," he said, his voice a rich baritone that carried clearly. "I've been hoping to find you." Georgiana stared at him in complete shock. He knew her name. The Duke of Ashford knew her name. Around them, conversations stopped. Heads turned. Her nieces' mouths fell open in undisguised astonishment. "Your Grace," Georgiana managed, dropping into a curtsy that she hoped concealed her trembling. "I believe you have me confused with someone else." "I don't." His lips curved in a slight smile. "You are Miss Georgiana Pemberton, are you not? Sister to Lord Pemberton, residing in his household in Bloomsbury?" Yes, but—" "Then there's no confusion." He offered his hand. "Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Pemberton?" Georgiana's mind went blank. This couldn't be happening. Dukes didn't ask spinster aunts to dance. This had to be a mistake, a joke, a hallucination brought on by years of invisibility. But Julian's hand remained extended, steady and sure. Behind her, Georgiana heard Lydia's sharp intake of breath and Cressida's strangled gasp. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Georgiana looked up into the Duke's eyes, searching for mockery or pity. She found neither. Only calm certainty, and something that looked almost like interest. I don't understand, Your Grace. It's quite simple. I'm asking you to dance. His smile widened fractionally. Unless you'd prefer to refuse? No, yes. I would be honored. If this story of unexpected recognition touches your heart, subscribe and comment below. Georgiana placed her hand in Julian's, acutely aware of every eye in the ballroom watching this impossible scene. The Duke of Ashford, the most sought-after bachelor in England, leading the invisible spinster aunt onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a waltz. Julian's hand settled at her waist, proper but warm through the thin fabric of her modest gown. His other hand held hers gently but firmly. "You're trembling," he observed quietly as they began to move. "I'm terrified," Georgiana admitted before she could stop herself. "Everyone is staring. Your Grace, I don't understand why you're doing this. Is it some sort of wager?" Julian's expression darkened. "A wager? Do I strike you as the sort of man who toys with people for amusement?" "No, I'm sorry. I just can't fathom why you would single me out. I'm nobody. Nothing." "That," Julian said firmly, "is categorically untrue. You are Miss Georgiana Pemberton. You speak 4 languages fluently. You're an accomplished musician and an even more accomplished scholar. You've managed your brother's household accounts for a decade, saving him from bankruptcy through your careful management. You've raised his daughters with more patience than they deserve. You are many things, Miss Pemberton, but nothing is not among them." Georgiana's step faltered. Julian steadied her effortlessly, guiding her back into the rhythm. "How do you know all that?" "I make it my business to be well informed, particularly about interesting people." "I'm not interesting. I'm the most boring person in London." "Are you?" Julian's eyes held a glint of amusement. "Then why have I spent the better part of 3 months engineering this introduction?" Georgiana's breath caught. 3 months? "I first noticed you at Lady Thornton's music-hall in March. You were sitting in the back corner, but when Lady Catherine murdered that poor Mozart sonata, you winced at exactly the same moments I did. Only someone with genuine musical knowledge would have recognized those particular errors. You noticed that. I notice a great deal, Miss Pemberton." They turned smoothly, and Julian's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I noticed that you correct your brother's daughter's French pronunciation under your breath. I noticed that you hide books inside your reticule to read during tedious events. I noticed that you're kind to servants and dismissive of flattery, all qualities I find rare and valuable." Georgiana's mind reeled. For months, she'd believed herself invisible. Yet this man, this Duke, had been watching her, noticing her, finding her worthy of attention. But why? The question escaped as barely a whisper. "Because I'm tired of empty-headed girls who giggle and simper. Because I need someone intelligent to converse with. Because you're the only woman in London who doesn't look at me and see a title and a fortune." Julian's voice dropped lower. "And because when you smiled at a child selling flowers outside the assembly rooms last week, giving her coin you could barely spare, I realized you might be exactly what I've been searching for." The waltz ended. The ballroom erupted in polite applause, though Georgiana could hear the underlying buzz of shocked whispers. Julian offered his arm. "Might I escort you to the terrace? I find the ballroom rather stifling." Georgiana glanced toward her nieces, who were watching with expressions of absolute fury, then back at Julian. "My nieces will be scandalized." Good. They could use a lesson in humility. His tone was pleasant, but his eyes were steel. "I heard what they said to you earlier, Miss Pemberton. The cruelty in their words. Do you endure that often?" Georgiana's cheeks flushed. "They're young. They mean every word. And they're old enough to know better." Julian guided her toward the terrace doors. "You shouldn't have to tolerate such treatment. Not from them, not from anyone." The terrace was blessedly empty and cool. Chinese lanterns cast soft pools of light across the stone balustrade. Beyond, the London streets stretched away into darkness. Georgiana withdrew her hand from Julian's arm and turned to face him, gathering what remained of her dignity. "Your Grace, I appreciate your kindness tonight, truly, but I'm not naive. Tomorrow, everyone will say you took pity on a pathetic spinster. My nieces will be even more insufferable. And you, You'll have wasted an evening that could have been spent with someone worthy of your attention." Julian moved to stand beside her at the balustrade. "Let me be very clear, Miss Pemberton. I don't do anything out of pity. I don't waste my time, and I am an excellent judge of who is worthy of my attention." He turned to face her. "I asked you to dance because I wanted to. I brought you out here because I have a proposition for you." Georgiana's heart stuttered. What sort of proposition? Julian was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the London skyline. When he spoke, his words were measured and deliberate. "I need a wife, Miss Pemberton. Not an ornament or a breeding mare, but a partner. Someone intelligent enough to manage my households, strong enough to withstand society's scrutiny, and honest enough to tell me when I'm being an arrogant fool." Georgiana's mouth fell open. You're proposing marriage? To me? Not yet. I'm proposing that we consider the possibility." Julian turned to face her fully. "I know this is sudden. I know it seems mad. But hear me out before you dismiss the idea entirely." "I'm 32 years old," Georgiana said, her voice rising slightly. "I'm plain, I'm poor, I'm a dependent in my brother's household. You're a duke. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. I want someone specific, someone like you." Julian's voice was calm, reasonable. "Miss Pemberton, I've watched you for months. I've seen your intelligence, your kindness, your strength. Those are the qualities I value, not youth or beauty or fortune. But why me specifically? There must be other intelligent women who want me for my title or my money or my position, who would simper and flatter and pretend to be whatever they think I want." Julian's expression was serious. "You, I suspect, would be perfectly content never to have met me at all. That honesty is exactly what I need." Georgiana sank onto a nearby bench, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is insane. Perhaps, but it's also practical." Julian sat beside her, maintaining a proper distance. "You're trapped in your brother's household, dependent on his charity, subjected to his daughter's cruelty. You have no prospects and no escape. I'm offering you both. In exchange for what? Partnership, companionship, honesty. You would manage my estates, all 5 of them. You would be the Duchess of Ashford with all the authority and responsibility that entails. You would want for nothing material. And in return you would give me your intelligence, your capability and your company. And heirs," Georgiana said quietly. "You would want heirs." Julian's expression flickered with something, discomfort perhaps. "Eventually, yes, that would be necessary. But I'm not a brute, Miss Pemberton. I wouldn't force anything unwelcome." Georgiana's mind spun. This was impossible. Dukes didn't propose to spinster aunts. This had to be some elaborate joke or dream. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You could have any young, beautiful woman in London. Why would you choose someone like me?" "Because young, beautiful women are taught to be decorative and compliant. You've been taught to be useful and resilient." Julian's voice was gentle. "Because you've survived years of being overlooked and dismissed without becoming bitter or cruel. Because when I imagine spending my life with someone, I imagine interesting conversations and genuine partnership. Not empty flattery and shallow pleasantness. You barely know me. I know enough, but if you need more certainty, I'm not asking for an immediate answer." Julian pulled a card from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Take a week. Think about it carefully. If you're interested, send word to this address. If not, forget this conversation happened, and I'll never trouble you again. And if I say yes, what then? Then we'll court properly. Give society time to adjust to the idea. Give ourselves time to know each other better. And if after that you still wish to proceed, we'll marry." He stood, offering his hand to help her rise. "But the choice is entirely yours, Miss Pemberton. No pressure, no obligation." Georgiana took his hand and stood on shaky legs. "My brother will think you've lost your mind." "Let him. I'm a duke. I'm permitted to be eccentric." Julian's smile was wry. "Besides, your brother's opinion is irrelevant. This is between you and me. My nieces will be apoplectic." "All the more reason to consider it," Julian replied, and for the first time Georgiana heard genuine humor in his voice. They returned to the ballroom, where conversation died the moment they appeared. Julian escorted Georgiana back to her original corner, bowed formally over her hand, and departed, leaving chaos in his wake. Lydia and Cressida descended on Georgiana the moment the Duke was out of earshot. "What did he say to you?" Lydia demanded. "What could you possibly have to say to the Duke of Ashford? He must have confused you with someone else," Cressida insisted. "There's no other explanation." Georgiana looked at her nieces, both beautiful, both cruel, both convinced of their own superiority. And for the first time in years, she felt something other than resignation. She felt possibility. "He knew exactly who I was," Georgiana said quietly, "and he asked me to dance because he wanted to. Not by mistake, not out of pity, by choice." "That's absurd," Lydia snapped. "Why would the Duke choose you when he could have anyone?" Georgiana met her niece's eyes steadily. "Perhaps you should ask him." She turned and walked away, leaving her nieces sputtering behind her. In her reticule, the Duke's card seemed to burn through the fabric. 1 week to decide, 1 week to choose between the life she knew, invisible, dependent, enduring, and the life he offered. It should have been an easy choice. So why was her heart pounding with equal parts terror and hope? The Pemberton household erupted the moment Georgiana arrived home. Her brother, Lord Pemberton, was waiting in the drawing room despite the late hour. His wife, Lady Pemberton, sat beside him, her face pinched with displeasure. Lydia and Cressida hovered nearby, both still in their ball gowns. "Is it true?" Lord Pemberton demanded, before Georgiana could even remove her shawl. "Did the Duke of Ashford single you out tonight?" "He asked me to dance," Georgiana replied carefully. "Yes. Why?" Lady Pemberton's voice was sharp. "What could you possibly have said or done to attract his attention?" "I did nothing. He approached me." "Ridiculous," Lydia interjected. "The Duke must have mistaken you for someone else. There's no other rational explanation." Georgiana thought of Julian's words, how he'd watched her for months, noticed her, chosen her deliberately. "He didn't mistake me for anyone. He knew my name, my circumstances, Your circumstances," Lord Pemberton interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Did you presume to discuss our family matters with a duke? Did you embarrass us by revealing our private affairs?" "I discussed nothing he already knew." "How?" Lady Pemberton demanded. "Who have you been talking to? What gossip have you been spreading?" Georgiana felt the familiar weight of accusation settling over her. In this household she was always wrong, always at fault, always the problem. "I haven't been spreading gossip. The Duke simply observes things." "Well, whatever his reasons for that peculiar display, you will not encourage further attention," Lord Pemberton declared. "It's unseemly. You're too old for such nonsense, and frankly, any association between you and the Duke reflects poorly on this family." "Reflects poorly?" Georgiana repeated quietly. "How does the Duke showing me attention reflect poorly?" "Because it's inappropriate," Lady Pemberton snapped. "You're a spinster aunt, a dependent. You have no business attracting the notice of eligible gentlemen. That's Lydia's and Cressida's role. You're supposed to fade into the background and be useful, not parade yourself before dukes." Cressida spoke up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Poor Aunt Georgiana, you must be so confused. The Duke was probably just being kind to a pathetic spinster. You shouldn't read anything into it. Tomorrow everyone will laugh about it," Lydia added. "The Duke's momentary aberration. How mortifying for you." Georgiana looked at her family, the brother who tolerated her presence in exchange for free labor, the sister-in-law who resented every bite of food she ate, the nieces who mocked her daily. She'd endured their treatment for 10 years, telling herself she had no choice. But Julian's card in her reticule whispered otherwise. "If you'll excuse me," Georgiana said quietly. "I'm quite tired. I'd like to retire." "We're not finished discussing this," Lord Pemberton began. "I am." Georgiana met his eyes steadily. "Good night." She climbed the stairs to her small room, barely larger than a closet, tucked away in the servants' wing because the family bedrooms were needed for Lydia and Cressida. Once inside, she lit a candle and withdrew Julian's card. Julian Ashford, Duke of Ashford, Ashford House, Mayfair, 1 week to decide. Georgiana moved to her tiny writing desk and pulled out her private journal, the only place she allowed herself complete honesty. "The Duke of Ashford asked me to dance tonight," she wrote. "Then he proposed that we consider marriage. I should refuse immediately. It's madness. I'm 32, plain, poor, and nobody. He's wealthy, handsome, powerful, and could have anyone. But he chose me. He's been watching me for months and chose me deliberately. Not by mistake, not out of pity. Me." Her hand trembled as she continued writing. "What if I said yes? What if I allowed myself to believe this could be real? The risk is enormous. Society would be vicious. My family would be scandalized. And if it failed, if he changed his mind or regretted his choice, I would be left with nothing but humiliation. But if I refuse, I stay here, in this house, with these people, being useful and invisible until I die. Is safety worth that price? Georgiana set down her pen and stared at the card. 1 week. Over the next days, Georgiana found herself unable to think of anything else. She went through her usual motions, managing the household, correcting her niece's French, reviewing accounts, but her mind constantly circled back to Julian's proposition. By the 4th day, Georgiana had made lists of reasons to accept and reasons to refuse. The refuse list was longer and more logical. The accept list contained only one entry, because I want to. That should have been enough to dismiss the idea. Wanting something had never been reason enough before, but Georgiana kept thinking about Julian's words. You've survived years of being overlooked and dismissed without becoming bitter or cruel. Had she, though? Or had she simply become numb, resigned, dead inside except for the small secret part that still dared to hope? On the 5th day, Lady Pemberton summoned Georgiana to her sitting room. I've been thinking about this situation with the Duke, she began without preamble, and I've concluded that while his attention was inappropriate, it could be turned to our advantage. Our advantage? Georgiana repeated. The family's advantage. If you maintain some acquaintance with His Grace, you might be able to further Lydia's or Cressida's interests. Arrange an introduction, perhaps. Speak favorably of them. Lady Pemberton's expression was calculating. That's the sort of useful thing a grateful dependent would do. Georgiana stared at her sister-in-law. You want me to use the Duke's attention to promote my nieces? Why not? It's not as if you have any personal prospects. At least this way your association with him would serve some purpose. Something inside Georgiana snapped, not loudly or dramatically, but with quiet, absolute finality. No, she said. Lady Pemberton blinked. I beg your pardon. No, I won't use the Duke's attention to further anyone's interests but my own. Georgiana stood, her hands steady for the first time in days. And I won't be grateful for scraps of tolerance in a house where I'm treated as a burden. How dare you, after everything we've done for you? You've done nothing for me. I've managed your household, raised your daughters, saved your husband from bankruptcy, all without pay or appreciation. I've earned my keep 100 times over. Georgiana's voice was calm but firm, and I'm done. Done? What do you mean, done? I mean I'm leaving. I'm accepting the Duke's offer. Lady Pemberton's face went red, then white. You're accepting... Georgiana, he hasn't made you an offer. He danced with you once. You're delusional if you think he made me an offer, and I'm accepting it. Georgiana moved toward the door. I'll send for my belongings once I'm settled. You'll ruin yourself. Society will destroy you. Perhaps, but I'd rather be destroyed on my own terms than live one more day being useful in yours. Georgiana went directly to her room, pulled out her small stock of writing paper, and penned a brief note. Your Grace, I have considered your proposition carefully. If your offer still stands, I accept. I await your instruction. Georgiana Pemberton. She sealed the note, addressed it to Ashford House, and carried it personally to the post before she could change her mind. 2 hours later, a response arrived by private messenger. Miss Pemberton, my carriage will collect you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Bring whatever belongings you wish to keep. You will stay at my aunt's townhouse. She has agreed to serve as chaperone during our courtship. We will discuss details when you arrive. Yours, Ashford. Georgiana read the note 3 times, her heart pounding. He'd had a plan already in place, an aunt to serve as chaperone. He'd been certain she would accept, or perhaps he'd simply been hopeful. That night, Georgiana packed her few belongings, mostly books, her mother's jewelry, her painting supplies. She owned very little. 10 years in the Pemberton household had taught her not to accumulate possessions that could be taken away. When Lydia discovered her packing, she rushed to find her mother. Within minutes, the entire household descended on Georgiana's room. You're actually leaving? Lord Pemberton looked genuinely shocked. Over one dance with a duke who was clearly being polite? He's sending his carriage for me tomorrow morning, Georgiana replied calmly. I'm going to stay with his aunt while we court properly. Court? Cressida's voice was shrill. Aunt Georgiana, you can't possibly believe the Duke wants to court you. He said so explicitly, and I believe him. You're making a fool of yourself, Lydia hissed. When he realizes what you are, a plain, aging spinster, he'll withdraw his interest. Then you'll have nowhere to go. Then I'll deal with that if it happens. Georgiana folded her last dress. But I'm done living in fear of hypothetical disasters. I'm choosing possibility over safety. You're choosing delusion over reality, Lady Pemberton snapped. Mark my words, Georgiana, when this falls apart, don't come crawling back here expecting sympathy. I won't, Georgiana promised. If it falls apart, I'll find somewhere else to land, but I won't stay here another day. Lord Pemberton tried once more. Georgiana, be reasonable. You're too old for romantic nonsense. Accept your place. My place? Georgiana turned to face him. My place is wherever I choose it to be, and I choose to leave. The Duke's carriage arrived at precisely 10 o'clock. It was magnificent. Polished black lacquer with the Ashford crest embossed in gold, drawn by 4 matched greys. A liveried footman loaded Georgiana's modest trunk, while the Pemberton household watched from the windows. Georgiana climbed into the carriage without looking back. The interior was luxurious beyond anything she'd experienced. Velvet seats, polished wood, a lap blanket of softest wool. Georgiana ran her hand over the fabric, marveling. This was the life Julian offered. This comfort, this security. But was it worth the risk? The journey to Mayfair took half an hour through London's crowded streets. When the carriage finally stopped, Georgiana peered out to see an elegant townhouse, smaller than she'd expected but beautifully maintained. The footman helped her down. The door opened before she could knock, revealing an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a kind face. Miss Pemberton, I presume? I'm Lady Catherine Ashford, Julian's aunt. Do come in. The interior was tasteful and comfortable, not ostentatious but clearly expensive. Lady Catherine led Georgiana to a cosy sitting room where tea was already prepared. Julian will join us shortly, Lady Catherine said, pouring tea with practiced ease. But I wanted a moment to speak with you privately first. Georgiana accepted the cup with trembling hands. I appreciate your willingness to chaperone, Lady Catherine. I know this situation is unusual. Unusual? Lady Catherine laughed. My dear, it's extraordinary. My nephew has shown interest in precisely no one for 7 years. Then he sees you and becomes determined to marry you within a week. I'm absolutely fascinated. He told you about his proposition? He tells me everything. We're quite close. Lady Catherine studied Georgiana with shrewd eyes. He's been watching you for months, you know. Attending events he normally abhors just to observe you. I've never seen him so focused on anything outside his estates and investments. But why me? The question burst out before Georgiana could stop it. I'm nothing special, You're precisely what he needs, Lady Catherine interrupted firmly. Julian is brilliant, but he's also isolated. He needs someone who challenges his mind, not someone who simpers and flatters. Someone real. She leaned forward. Tell me honestly, Miss Pemberton, are you accepting his suit because you care for him, or because you want to escape your circumstances? Georgiana considered lying, then remembered Julian's emphasis on honesty. Both, she admitted. I barely know him. How could I care for him yet? But I'm intrigued. And yes, I'm desperate to escape my brother's household. Does that make me mercenary? It makes you honest, which is exactly what Julian needs. Lady Catherine smiled. Most women would have lied and claimed instant affection. You didn't, that's promising. A knock at the door interrupted them. A butler appeared. Your Grace, His Grace has arrived. Julian entered the room, and Georgiana's breath caught. In daylight, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. Miss Pemberton, he bowed formally. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Aunt, for hosting. It's my pleasure. Now I'll leave you two to talk, but keep the door open, Julian. Propriety must be observed. Lady Catherine departed with a knowing smile. Julian sat across from Georgiana, suddenly looking almost nervous. I'm glad you came. I wasn't certain you would. I wasn't certain I should, Georgiana admitted. This is madness, Your Grace. Julian, please. If we're courting, you should use my given name. Julian, she repeated. The name felt strange on her tongue. I need to understand something. You say you've been watching me for months, but why? What did you see that made you think I would be a suitable duchess? Julian was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on her face. I saw someone kind when they didn't have to be, someone intelligent when intelligence wasn't valued, someone who endured cruelty with grace, instead of becoming cruel themselves. He leaned forward. I saw someone real, Georgiana. In a world of performance and pretense, you were genuine. That's rarer than diamonds. Georgiana's throat tightened. You're going to be disappointed. I'm not as admirable as you think. I don't think you're perfect. I think you're real. There's a difference." Julian's expression was serious. "Georgiana, I'm going to be very honest with you. I need a wife, but not for romantic reasons. I need a partner, someone capable of managing my estates, representing the family well, giving me intelligent company. I can't offer you passion or romance, but I can offer you respect, security, and freedom to be yourself. And you believe I can be that partner? I know you can. You've been managing your brother's household for years. You speak 4 languages. You're educated well beyond most women. You're exactly what I need." Georgiana took a shaky breath. "And what do I get in return? Beyond security? Freedom," Julian said simply. "Freedom to paint, to read, to pursue your interests without anyone mocking you. Freedom from dependence and cruelty. A position of respect." He paused. "And companionship. I promise I'll never be cruel to you, Georgiana. I'll value your mind and your company, but not my heart." Julian's expression flickered with something. Regret, perhaps. "I'm not capable of romantic love. My parents' marriage destroyed that capacity, but I can offer you partnership, respect, and care. Is that enough?" Georgiana considered Julian's question carefully. Was partnership, respect, and care enough? Could she accept a marriage without love? But then what was love anyway? Hadn't she spent 32 years watching couples who claimed love treat each other with casual cruelty? Hadn't she watched her own brother profess love for his wife, while both made each other miserable? Perhaps respect and honesty were worth more than romantic delusion. "It's enough," Georgiana said finally. "Or at least I'm willing to discover if it can be enough." Julian's expression softened with visible relief. "Good, then let's proceed properly. I'd like to court you publicly, take you driving, escort you to events, let society adjust to the idea of us together. It will be difficult. People will say terrible things." "They already say terrible things about me," Georgiana replied. "At least now I'll have you beside me when they do. Always." Julian reached across and took her hand, the first deliberate touch since the ball. His hand was warm, steady, comforting. "I protect what's mine, Georgiana, and you're going to be mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent an unexpected thrill through her. Someone claiming her, protecting her, valuing her enough to defend her. "When do we start?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Hyde Park at 4 o'clock, the fashionable hour." Julian's smile was wry. "We'll give society something to gossip about." The next afternoon, Georgiana dressed with care in her best gown, a pale blue muslin that was 3 years old, but still respectable. Lady Catherine had offered to loan her something finer, but Georgiana refused. If Julian wanted her real, she wouldn't start their courtship by pretending to be something she wasn't. Julian arrived in an open carriage drawn by magnificent matched bays. He helped Georgiana in with the same careful courtesy he'd shown at the ball, then climbed up beside her. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." Hyde Park at 4 o'clock was a parade of society's finest. Every fashionable family took the air, showing off their equipages, their horses, their daughters. As Julian's carriage entered the park, heads began turning. The whispers started immediately. "Is that Miss Pemberton, the spinster aunt? The Duke is actually courting her. How extraordinary. She must have trapped him somehow. There's no other explanation." Julian's hand found Georgiana's on the seat between them. "Ignore them," he murmured. "Look at me instead." Georgiana turned her head to find him watching her with an expression of such calm certainty that some of her anxiety eased. "Better?" he asked. "Marginally. That's progress." Julian squeezed her hand. "Now, tell me about the book you're reading. I noticed you had one hidden in your reticule at the ball." They spent the drive discussing literature, politics, and philosophy. Julian's intelligence was formidable, but he didn't use it to dominate. Instead, he engaged genuinely with her opinions, challenged her thoughts, made her think harder. Georgiana found herself relaxing, forgetting the stares and whispers. This was what Julian had promised: intelligent company, genuine conversation, something she'd been starving for. They encountered Lady Pemberton and the girls near the Serpentine. Lydia's face went scarlet when she saw Georgiana sitting beside the Duke. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton simpered, positioning herself to block their path. "What a delightful surprise, and Georgiana, I'm so relieved to see you well. We've been terribly worried." "How kind," Julian said dryly. "Though I'm not sure why you'd worry. Miss Pemberton is perfectly safe with my aunt. Of course, still such an unusual arrangement. Lady Pemberton's smile was strained. I do hope society isn't saying anything untoward. Society always says something untoward. I've learned not to concern myself with gossip. Julian nodded dismissively. Good afternoon, Lady Pemberton. He drove on, leaving Georgiana's former family sputtering behind them. That was magnificently rude, Georgiana observed. They deserve rudeness. I heard from my aunt how they treated you over the years. Julian's jaw was tight. They should be grateful I limit myself to coldness. Over the next week, Julian courted Georgiana with methodical determination. They drove in the park daily. He escorted her to the theatre, where they sat in his private box and discussed the performance. He took her to galleries and museums, delighting in her knowledge of art and history. And through it all, Julian was unfailingly respectful. He never pressured her, never made assumptions. His touches were careful and proper, a hand at her elbow, an offered arm. Nothing more. Georgiana found herself relaxing into the courtship. This wasn't romance, but it was pleasant, comfortable. And Julian's company was genuinely engaging. But society remained vicious. She's trapped him somehow. It won't last. He'll realize his mistake. Poor Duke, to be forced into marriage with such a creature. The comments stung, but Georgiana had endured worse. What troubled her more was the growing warmth she felt when Julian smiled at her, the flutter in her stomach when he took her hand, the way she found herself watching for his carriage each afternoon. She was developing feelings, real feelings. For a man who'd explicitly told her he couldn't reciprocate, that was dangerous. 2 weeks into their courtship, Julian invited Georgiana to visit Ashford House properly. You should see your future home, he explained, and meet the staff who'll be under your direction. Ashford House was magnificent, a palatial residence in the heart of Mayfair, 4 stories of elegant architecture filled with priceless art and furniture. Georgiana walked through rooms larger than entire houses, trying not to feel overwhelmed. This will all be yours to manage, Julian said as they toured the main floor. I'll introduce you to the housekeeper, Mrs. Winters. She's been with the family for 30 years and knows everything. Mrs. Winters proved to be a formidable woman, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. But when Georgiana asked intelligent questions about household management and listened carefully to the answers, the housekeeper's expression softened. You'll do well here, Miss Pemberton, Mrs. Winters said finally. It's been too long since Ashford House had a proper mistress. After the tour, Julian led Georgiana to his private study, a book-lined sanctuary that smelled of leather and sandalwood. This is my favorite room, he admitted, gesturing for her to sit. I spend most of my time here when I'm in London. Georgiana examined the books with genuine interest. Philosophy, politics, agriculture, poetry, an eclectic collection that spoke of a curious, active mind. You have excellent taste in literature, she observed. As do you. I've been meaning to ask, what are you currently reading? They fell into easy conversation about books and ideas. Julian made tea himself rather than summoning a servant, a casual intimacy that made Georgiana's heart flutter. I enjoy this, Julian said suddenly. Talking with you. I've never had this with anyone before. Intellectual conversation? Genuine conversation. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. You tell me what you actually think. It's refreshing. Georgiana set down her teacup. Julian, I need to be honest with you about something. His expression grew attentive. Always. What is it? I'm developing feelings, real feelings. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I know that wasn't part of our arrangement. I know you said you can't offer romance, but I can't seem to help it, and I think you should know before we go any further. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and moved to the window, his back to her. Georgiana, He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I told you I wasn't capable of romantic attachment. That was what I believed, what I told myself. And now? He turned to face her, and Georgiana was shocked to see vulnerability in his eyes. Now I don't know what I'm capable of, because I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to our time together, feeling things I thought I'd locked away permanently. Georgiana's heart pounded. What are you saying? I'm saying I might have been wrong. Julian crossed the room and knelt before her chair, taking her hands. I'm saying that what I feel for you goes beyond respect or partnership. I'm saying I'm terrified because this wasn't supposed to happen. Julian, let me finish. His hands tightened on hers. I watched my parents destroy each other with what they called love. I swore I'd never allow emotion to cloud my judgment. But you've made that impossible. You've made me feel things I've spent years avoiding. Is that good or bad? Georgiana whispered. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. He lifted one hand to her face, cupping her cheek gently. May I kiss you, Georgiana? She nodded, unable to speak. Julian leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. It was gentle, questioning, tender. Nothing like the perfunctory kiss she'd imagined a marriage of convenience would include. Georgiana's eyes closed as she kissed him back. Julian made a soft sound and deepened the kiss slightly, his hand sliding from her cheek to tangle in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. That was... Georgiana couldn't find words. Unexpected, Julian finished. He rested his forehead against hers. I thought I could keep this purely practical. But Georgiana, I'm not made of stone, and you're not the plain, forgettable woman you believe yourself to be. Then what am I? Julian pulled back to look at her, his eyes intense. You're beautiful. Not in the conventional way society values, perhaps. But to me, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met, because your beauty comes from who you are, not what you look like. Tears pricked Georgiana's eyes. No one has ever said anything like that to me. Then everyone has been blind. Julian stood and drew her to her feet, pulling her into his arms. Georgiana, I can't promise you romantic declarations or poetic gestures, but I can promise you this. You matter to me, more than I expected, more than I'm comfortable with, and I want to see where these feelings lead. Georgiana buried her face against his chest, feeling his heart beating steadily. I'm scared. So am I. Julian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But perhaps we can be scared together. 3 days later, Julian proposed formally. Not with grand gestures or public spectacle, but privately in Lady Catherine's sitting room, with only his aunt as witness. He knelt before Georgiana with a ring, a magnificent sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Georgiana Pemberton, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not as a matter of convenience or practicality, but because I care for you deeply and want to spend my life with you. Georgiana looked at him, this powerful duke who'd chosen her, noticed her, valued her when no one else had, who made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Julian slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her thoroughly, apparently forgetting his aunt's presence. Lady Catherine cleared her throat delicately. Congratulations to you both, though I do think some decorum is still required, Julian. Julian pulled back, looking unrepentant. We're engaged now, surely that allows some latitude. Some, not carte blanche. But Lady Catherine was smiling. I'm happy for you both, truly. The announcement of their engagement appeared in the morning papers 2 days later. The reaction was explosive. Society was scandalized, fascinated, and deeply confused. How had the plain spinster aunt captured the most eligible duke in England? What hold did she have over him? Was there some scandal no one knew about? The speculation was endless, and often cruel. Lord Pemberton arrived at Lady Catherine's townhouse the day after the announcement, demanding to see Georgiana. I'll speak to him, Georgiana told Julian when she was informed of her brother's arrival. Alone, he can't hurt me anymore. Julian looked unhappy, but nodded. I'll be right outside if you need me. Lord Pemberton was pacing the drawing room when Georgiana entered. His face was red with emotion, anger or embarrassment. Georgiana couldn't tell which. Have you lost your mind? He demanded without preamble. Accepting a proposal from the Duke of Ashbourne? Georgiana, this is madness. You're 32 years old. You're plain, you're poor, you have no connections. He'll realize his mistake and leave you destitute. He won't, Georgiana said calmly, because this isn't a mistake. He knows exactly what he's doing. Impossible. Men like him don't marry women like you. There must be some trick, some deception. The only deception was believing I deserved to be invisible and overlooked. Georgiana met her brother's eyes steadily. Julian sees me, Charles. He values me. He chose me deliberately, knowing everything about me, and I chose him. You're going to embarrass this family. I'm going to be a duchess. If anyone is embarrassed, that's their problem, not mine. Lord Pemberton's expression turned calculating. Well, if this marriage is truly happening, then naturally the family will expect certain considerations. A generous settlement, perhaps. Positions for my daughters. No, Georgiana's voice was firm. You'll get nothing from me or my husband. You tolerated my presence for 10 years in exchange for free labor. That debt is paid. Ungrateful girl. After everything we did for you, you did nothing for me. Georgiana's composure cracked. You gave me a room the size of a closet and food I earned by managing your household perfectly. Your daughters mocked me daily while you stood by and allowed it. You made me feel worthless, Charles. So no, you'll get nothing from me except my absence. Georgiana, your grace, she corrected coldly. Soon I'll be the Duchess of Ashford. You'll address me properly. The door opened and Julian entered, his expression dangerous. I believe Miss Pemberton asked to conduct this meeting alone, Lord Pemberton. But I've heard enough. You have 60 seconds to leave my aunt's house before I have you thrown out. Lord Pemberton looked between them, his face purpling. You'll regret this. Both of you. Mark my words. 45 seconds, Julian said pleasantly. Lord Pemberton left, slamming the door behind him. Georgiana sank onto the settee, suddenly shaking. Julian sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. You did well, he murmured against her hair. I'm proud of you. I've never stood up to him before. Never. You were magnificent. Julian pulled back to look at her. How do you feel? Georgiana considered. Free. Terrified. But mostly free. Good. That's exactly how you should feel. He kissed her forehead. Now shall we discuss wedding plans? I thought perhaps a month from now. A month? Julian, that's too soon. There's so much to plan. I don't want an elaborate society wedding. Just family and close friends. Simple, elegant, genuine. Like us. His eyes were warm. Unless you want something grander. Georgiana thought of elaborate weddings she'd attended, spectacles designed to impress rather than celebrate. No, simple sounds perfect. Then a month it is. Julian smiled. I want you to be my wife, Georgiana. The sooner the better. The week before their wedding, Julian insisted they attend one final ball together, Lady Thornton's annual gala, the event of the season. I want to show society that we're united, he explained, that we're not ashamed or uncertain, that our marriage is real and chosen. Georgiana was nervous, but agreed. Lady Catherine helped her prepare, lending her a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her colouring beautifully. You look lovely, my dear, Lady Catherine said approvingly. Julian will be stunned. When Julian arrived to collect her, his expression proved Lady Catherine right. He stopped in the doorway, staring. Georgiana, you're beautiful. It's just the dress, Georgiana protested, feeling her cheeks warm. It's not the dress. Julian crossed to her and took her hand. Though the dress is spectacular, it's you. You're radiant. At the ball, their entrance caused the expected stir. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Whispers began immediately. But this time Julian didn't lead Georgiana to a quiet corner. Instead, he kept her on his arm as they moved through the crowd, introducing her to influential friends, treating her with obvious respect and affection. When the dancing began, Julian led her onto the floor for the first waltz. Ready? He asked. No, but I'm here anyway. Julian smiled and pulled her into the dance. As they moved together, Georgiana was acutely aware of hundreds of eyes watching them, but Julian's gaze never left her face. Ignore them, he murmured. There's only you and me. They're all wondering what you see in me. Then they're all fools. Julian's hand tightened at her waist. I see everything, Georgiana. Your intelligence, your strength, your kindness, your beautiful mind and generous heart. They're blind if they can't see what I see. Midway through the dance, Julian suddenly stopped. Georgiana looked at him in confusion. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. But I want to say something. To everyone. Julian raised his voice, addressing the entire ballroom. May I have your attention, please? The music faltered and stopped. Every eye turned to them. Georgiana's heart pounded. Julian, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago. Julian kept her hand in his as he addressed the assembly. Many of you have spent the past month gossiping about my engagement, speculating about Miss Pemberton's hold over me, suggesting that she trapped me or that I've lost my senses. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Georgiana wanted to sink through the floor. Let me be perfectly clear, Julian continued, his voice carrying. I pursued Miss Pemberton. I chose her deliberately, after months of observation. I am not trapped, not coerced, and I have never been more certain of any decision in my life. He turned to Georgiana, his eyes warm. This woman is extraordinary. She's intelligent, capable, kind, and honest. She's everything I didn't know I needed, and I count myself the most fortunate man in England that she agreed to marry me." Then, in front of all of London society, Julian Ashford, Duke of Ashbourne, did something unprecedented. He knelt. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Georgiana stared at him in shock. "Julian, what?" "I knelt when I proposed privately," he said, still on one knee, still holding her hand. "But society needs to understand that this isn't some cold arrangement. This is real." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Georgiana Pemberton, and I want everyone to know it." Georgiana couldn't breathe. He'd said he loved her, in front of everyone, after telling her he wasn't capable of romantic love. "You love me," she whispered. "Desperately, completely, more than I thought possible." Julian stood and cupped her face with both hands. "I was wrong when I said I couldn't offer you romance. I was wrong about what I was capable of. You've changed everything, Georgiana." "I love you too," Georgiana breathed. "So much." Julian kissed her, right there, in the middle of the ballroom, in front of all of society. It was improper and scandalous and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom erupted in applause. Lady Thornton approached, looking delighted. "Your Grace, how wonderfully romantic. I do believe you've given us the most memorable moment of the season." Other guests crowded around, offering congratulations. Even those who'd been most vicious in their gossip seemed charmed by Julian's public declaration. Near the refreshment table, Georgiana caught sight of Lydia and Cressida, both looking absolutely stunned. "Poor spinster aunt," Georgiana murmured to Julian. "Not so poor anymore." Julian laughed and pulled her close. "No, not poor at all. You're the richest woman in London, because you have what everyone else wants, genuine love." The wedding took place on a perfect spring morning in the private chapel at Ashford House. As Julian had promised, it was small and intimate, just close family and friends. Lady Catherine served as Georgiana's attendant. Julian's closest friend, the Earl of Pembroke, stood up with him. Notably absent were Lord Pemberton and his family, who had not been invited. Georgiana wore a gown of ivory silk that Lady Catherine had commissioned as a wedding gift. It was simple but elegant, making her feel like a duchess already. As she walked down the aisle toward Julian, her heart pounded. He stood waiting for her, looking impossibly handsome in his formal attire, his eyes never leaving her face. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When Julian slipped the wedding band onto her finger, a perfect match to her engagement ring, his hand trembled slightly. "I, Julian, take you, Georgiana, to be my wife," he said clearly, "to have and to hold from this day forward, to love and to cherish, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Georgiana's eyes filled with tears as she repeated her own vows. This was real. She was actually marrying him. "You may kiss your bride," the vicar said. Julian pulled Georgiana into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the delighted applause of their small gathering. "My duchess," he murmured against her lips. Finally. The wedding breakfast was held in Ashford House's elegant dining room. Toasts were made. Food was served. Georgiana smiled until her face hurt, overwhelmed by the reality of her transformed life. "Happy," Julian whispered during a quiet moment. "Terrified," Georgiana admitted. "But yes, happy." "Good, because this is forever, Georgiana. You're mine now." By late afternoon, the guests had departed. Julian had arranged for them to spend their wedding night at Ashford House, rather than travelling to one of his country estates. "I thought you might prefer privacy and comfort over romance and adventure," he explained. As evening fell, Georgiana found herself in the Duchess's chambers, rooms that were now officially hers. They were beautiful, decorated in soft blues and creams, with an enormous four-poster bed that made her blush. A connecting door led to Julian's rooms. Georgiana stared at it, her heart racing. Tonight they would consummate their marriage. A knock at the connecting door made her jump. "May I come in?" Julian's voice was gentle. Georgiana took a deep breath. "Yes." Julian entered, now wearing only a dark dressing gown. He looked younger somehow, less formal, almost vulnerable. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous, excited, terrified?" Georgiana managed a shaky laugh. "All of the above." Julian crossed to her and took her hands. "We don't have to do anything tonight if you're not ready. There's no rush." "I want to," Georgiana said quickly. I've never... I know. Neither have I, actually. Georgiana's eyes widened. You haven't? Julian looked almost embarrassed. I told you I was determined not to be like my father. That included avoiding casual intimacy. I wanted my first time to be with my wife, with someone I loved. He cupped her face gently. With you. The revelation that Julian was as inexperienced as she was somehow made Georgiana feel braver. They were learning together, discovering together. Then we'll figure it out together, she whispered. Julian kissed her softly, then more deeply. Georgiana wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the pent-up longing she'd been suppressing. What followed was tender and awkward and wonderful. Julian was gentle, constantly checking that she was comfortable, moving slowly despite his obvious desire. When Georgiana tensed at moments of discomfort, he kissed her and whispered reassurances until she relaxed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the enormous bed, both breathing hard. Are you all right? Julian asked, pulling her close against his chest. I'm perfect, Georgiana murmured. I didn't know it could be like that. Neither did I. Julian pressed a kiss to her temple. I love you, Georgiana, my duchess, my wife, my everything. I love you too. Georgiana tilted her head to look at him. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For giving me a life I never dared dream of. Julian's expression grew serious. You gave me something far more valuable. You gave me the courage to feel again, to love, to be vulnerable. He tightened his arms around her. I was half alive before you, Georgiana. Now I'm whole. The first month of marriage was a revelation. Georgiana had expected partnership and respect. What she got was far more: genuine companionship, passionate love, and a sense of belonging she'd never experienced. Julian was an attentive husband. He sought her opinion on estate matters, genuinely valuing her intelligence. He encouraged her painting, setting up a proper studio in Ashford House. He made love to her with increasing confidence and skill, learning her body as he'd learned her mind. But more than anything, he made her feel valued, seen, cherished. I need to visit Thornwood, Julian announced one morning at breakfast. Thornwood was his primary country estate in Derbyshire. The steward has some matters requiring my attention. I thought you might like to see your new home. I'd love to, Georgiana replied. When do we leave? Tomorrow, if that suits you. We'll stay a month at least. Get you properly acquainted with the estate and the staff. The journey to Thornwood took 2 days. As their carriage crested the final hill and the house came into view, Georgiana caught her breath. Thornwood was magnificent, a sprawling Elizabethan manor surrounded by formal gardens and ancient oaks. It was far grander than Ashford House, clearly the seat of a powerful family. It's beautiful, Georgiana whispered. It's yours now, as much as mine. Julian squeezed her hand. I want you to love it as I do. The staff welcomed them warmly. Mrs. Harrison, the housekeeper, was less intimidating than Mrs. Winters, but equally capable. She showed Georgiana through the main rooms with obvious pride. It's been too long since we had a proper duchess, Mrs. Harrison said. The house has felt empty. I'll do my best to fill it, Georgiana promised. Over the following weeks, Georgiana threw herself into learning her new role. She met with the staff daily, reviewed household accounts, visited tenant farmers with Julian, and slowly began to feel like she belonged. One afternoon, while Julian was meeting with his steward, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. Lady Pemberton and her daughters are calling, Your Grace, the butler informed Georgiana. Shall I show them in? Georgiana's first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. Yes, show them to the drawing room. Lady Pemberton swept in with Lydia and Cressida behind her, all wearing expressions of forced politeness. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton simpered, curtsying deeply. How kind of you to receive us. We happen to be visiting friends in the area and thought we'd pay our respects to the new Duchess. How convenient, Georgiana replied dryly. Do sit down. The conversation was stilted and awkward. Lady Pemberton praised the house effusively. Lydia and Cressida remained mostly silent, their eyes taking in every detail of Georgiana's new life. Finally, Lady Pemberton got to the point. Your Grace, I wonder if we might impose on your generosity. Lydia is to be married in the autumn, to a baronet with a small estate in Suffolk. We had hoped that perhaps you and his Grace might attend, and possibly sponsor her presentation at court. Georgiana understood immediately. They wanted her connections, her influence, the prestige of the Ashford name attached to Lydia's marriage. "I'm afraid we have no plans to attend any weddings this autumn," Georgiana said pleasantly. "And as for court presentations, I'm still learning the intricacies of that system myself. Perhaps in a few years, I'll be comfortable sponsoring someone." Lady Pemberton's smile tightened. "Of course, we understand. Though family loyalty is earned, not demanded," Georgiana interrupted firmly. "You treated me as a burden for 10 years. Your daughters mocked me daily. You made my life miserable. Did you truly think one title would erase all of that?" "We were always kind to you," Cressida protested. "You called me poor spinster aunt and said I was plain as pudding. You laughed at my clothes, my prospects, my very existence." Georgiana's voice remained calm but firm. "That wasn't kindness. That was cruelty. We were young. We didn't mean—" "You meant every word. And now you want my help because I'm useful to you." Georgiana stood. "The answer is no. To all of it. You're not welcome in my home or my life. You ungrateful—" The drawing-room door opened and Julian entered, his expression dangerous. "I believe my wife has made herself clear. You have 5 minutes to leave my estate before I have you escorted off." Lady Pemberton gathered her daughters and fled. After they left, Julian pulled Georgiana into his arms. "I'm proud of you. I should have said yes. Been the bigger person. Why? They don't deserve your generosity. You owe them nothing." Julian kissed her forehead. "You're a duchess now, Georgiana. You have power. Use it to protect yourself, not to please people who hurt you." As summer progressed, Georgiana truly settled into her role as Duchess. She discovered she had a talent for estate management, implementing several improvements to tenant housing that Julian immediately approved. "You're a natural at this," he told her, after she'd presented a detailed plan for renovating the village school. "I knew you would be. I like having purpose, real purpose, beyond just existing quietly in a corner. You'll never be in a corner again. Not while I'm alive." Julian pulled her close. "You're my partner, Georgiana, in every sense." They fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings spent on estate business, afternoons riding or painting, evenings reading together in the library, and nights were reserved for the growing passion between them. Julian proved to be an enthusiastic and attentive lover. Their initial awkwardness had given way to genuine pleasure and intimacy. Georgiana had never imagined marriage could include this level of physical connection and joy. In late August, Georgiana noticed changes in her body, increased fatigue, sensitivity to certain foods, a general feeling of being slightly off. When she consulted the local physician, Dr. Morrison, his examination confirmed her suspicion. "Congratulations, Your Grace. You're with child. I estimate you're about 2 months along." Georgiana sat in stunned silence. A baby. She was going to have Julian's baby. The news filled her with a confusing mixture of joy and terror. She wanted this, wanted to give Julian an heir, wanted to have a family of their own. But pregnancy and childbirth were dangerous. Women died. Children died. She told Julian that evening as they prepared for bed. "I have something to tell you," she began nervously. Julian immediately looked concerned. "What's wrong? Are you unwell?" "Not unwell, just... I'm pregnant. Dr. Morrison confirmed it today. We're going to have a child." For a moment, Julian simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the most brilliant smile she'd ever seen. "Truly? We're having a baby?" "Truly. In about 7 months, if Dr. Morrison's calculations are correct." Julian pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "This is... Georgiana, I'm so happy I can barely speak. You're not worried? Childbirth is dangerous. We'll have the best physicians. You'll have every care and comfort." Julian pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "But mostly I'm just grateful. Grateful that you're mine, that we're building a family together." "I'm scared," Georgiana admitted. "So am I. But we'll face it together, just like we've faced everything else." Julian placed his hand gently over her still flat stomach. "Our child, the product of our love." Over the following months, Julian became increasingly protective. He insisted Georgiana rest more, do less physical work, avoid anything that might be remotely dangerous. It was simultaneously endearing and exasperating. "I'm pregnant, not made of porcelain," Georgiana protested when he tried to prevent her from climbing stairs. "You're carrying my child, your precious cargo." Julian's tone was firm. "Humor me, please." As Georgiana's pregnancy progressed, they returned to London for the winter season. Her condition was now visible, and society's reaction was predictably mixed. Some were genuinely happy for them. Others whispered that the pregnancy proved Georgiana had trapped the Duke after all. But Georgiana found she no longer cared what society thought. She was loved. She was valued. She was building a family with a man who saw her as precious. One evening at a small dinner party, Lady Catherine pulled Georgiana aside. "I wanted to thank you," the older woman said. "For what?" "For saving my nephew. When you met him, he was half alive, going through the motions but not truly living. You brought him back to life, taught him to feel again." Lady Catherine squeezed Georgiana's hand. "He loves you desperately, you know." "I know, and I love him just as much." "Good, because he needs you. And that baby," Lady Catherine gestured to Georgiana's rounded stomach, "needs you both." Later that night, as Georgiana and Julian prepared for bed, he placed his hand on her stomach and felt their child move for the first time. "Did you feel that?" Georgiana asked, delighted. "I did." Julian's voice was filled with wonder. "That's our baby, our future." "Our miracle," Georgiana corrected. "A year ago I was a spinster aunt with no prospects. Now I'm a wife, a duchess, and soon to be a mother. It's more than I ever dared dream. A year ago, I was going through life without really living. You changed that." Julian kissed her gently. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for loving me. Always," Georgiana promised. "For the rest of our lives." Georgiana went into labor on a cold March evening. The pains started gradually, then increased in intensity until she could barely breathe through them. Julian was beside himself with worry. He paced outside the birthing chamber while Dr. Morrison and the midwife attended Georgiana inside. "Your Grace, you really should try to rest," Lady Catherine urged. "Labor can take many hours." "I can't rest. What if something goes wrong? What if—" "Julian." Lady Catherine gripped his arm firmly. "Georgiana is strong. She'll come through this. Have faith." Inside the chamber, Georgiana labored through the night. The pain was worse than anything she'd imagined, but she focused on the end goal, their child, Julian's heir, the product of their unexpected love. As dawn broke, the baby finally arrived, with a lusty cry. "A daughter, Your Grace," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant in Georgiana's arms. Healthy and whole. Georgiana stared at the tiny, perfect face. Her daughter. Their daughter. The door burst open and Julian rushed in, ignoring propriety. "Georgiana, are you—" He stopped, staring at the bundle in her arms. "Meet your daughter," Georgiana said softly. Julian crossed to the bed and looked down at their child with an expression of absolute wonder. "She's perfect. You're both perfect." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "What shall we name her?" "Catherine," Georgiana said, glancing at Lady Catherine, who stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "After the woman who made all this possible." "Catherine Georgiana Ashford," Julian agreed. "It's perfect." He leaned over and kissed Georgiana's forehead. "Thank you. For her. For everything. I love you so much." "I love you too." 6 weeks later, they christened Catherine in the same chapel where they'd married. The event was small and intimate, attended only by close friends and family. Notably present were Margaret Ashford, Georgiana's oldest friend, who'd remained loyal throughout everything. Notably absent were the Pembertons, who hadn't been invited. After the ceremony, as guests mingled in the drawing room, Julian pulled Georgiana aside. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace, diamonds and sapphires arranged in an intricate pattern. "It's beautiful," Georgiana breathed. "It's a thank you for giving me everything I didn't know I needed, a wife, a family, a reason to truly live." Julian fastened it around her neck. "You've transformed my life, Georgiana. You transformed mine first. You saw me when no one else did, because you were worth seeing." Julian kissed her gently. "My Duchess, my love, my everything." Later, as they stood together watching their daughter sleep peacefully in her cradle, Georgiana reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year and a half ago, she'd been a spinster aunt, mocked and dismissed, standing alone at yet another ball. She'd believed herself worthless, destined for a life of quiet endurance. Then Julian had knelt before her in that ballroom, choosing her publicly when he could have had anyone. He'd seen past society's judgment to the woman beneath. And in doing so, he'd given her everything. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That I'm grateful. That I never expected to be this happy. That you saved me." "We saved each other," Julian corrected. He turned her to face him. "I was empty before you, going through the motions of life without really living. You taught me what it means to feel, to love, to be truly alive." Georgiana kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Promise me something," he murmured. "Anything. Promise you'll never doubt your worth again. Promise you'll never forget that you're extraordinary, that you're loved, that you're everything. I promise if you promise the same." Julian smiled. "Deal." 5 years later, Georgiana stood in the ballroom at Ashford House, watching couples whirl across the floor. The occasion was their annual spring ball, an event that had become legendary in London society for its elegance and warmth. Beside her, Julian held their second child, a son named Edmund, who'd been born 2 years after Catherine. Their daughter was currently dancing with her Uncle Pembroke, her face bright with joy. "She's growing up too fast," Julian observed, watching Catherine with obvious pride. "She's only 6. We have years yet." Georgiana leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Though I admit, she does seem older sometimes. She has your intelligence and your strength." Julian pressed a kiss to her temple.